The first thing that hit me that morning was the smell. Burnt rubber, gasoline, and something strangely close to pure arrogance. I stepped out my front door, coffee in hand, squinting against the pale sunlight, then froze. There it was. My neighbor's son, the self-appointed king of the driveway, had parked his Audi R8 like he owned the whole neighborhood. And honestly, maybe he thought he did. The R8 gleamed in the early light, low, wide, flawless. But it wasn't just parked. It was performing. Nose inches from the hedge. Wheels are practically kissing the curb. Angled in a way that dared anyone to comment. I swear the car was humming with smugness. I frowned. I'd lived here long enough to know how these things usually played out. HOA rules were HOA rules. You didn't block the fire lane. You didn't straddle two spaces. You didn't, well, apparently all those rules didn't apply when you were a teenage boy in a $200,000 car, backed by a mother with a binder full of complaints and an entitlement level that could pass for a badge. I was halfway through my coffee when I heard the door behind me slam. Karen, HOA president, neighbor, and walking caution label stormed out wearing pastel yoga pants and a thundercloud expression. "Jason," she chirped, her voice syrupy sweet, but sharp enough to peel paint. "I hope you're not planning to, complain about my son's parking." I swallowed, irritation pressing hard behind my ribs. Well, technically yes. It's a little over the line." She shot me a look that made it clear that it was not on the table. "Honey, he's learning responsibility. And anyway, it's just for today. Just for today." In HOA terms, those three words always foreshadow doom. I nodded, because arguing with Karen was like arguing with gravity, pointless, fruitless, and guaranteed to hurt. I turned back toward my car, coffee going lukewarm, muttering under my breath, "Great, just great. Today I get to be the neighborhood traffic cop." But something was off. Her son wasn't even inside the car. He hadn't moved a muscle, standing there like he knew the vehicle itself could protect him from consequences. My gut tightened. Something was brewing, and it wasn't my coffee. I had no idea that within a few hours, that shiny, untouchable R8 would become the epicenter of a disaster I couldn't have imagined. The morning dragged on, and I kept pretending Karen's son would eventually move the car. I paced around my living room, half listening to the hum of my neighbor's sprinklers, half dreading the inevitable HOA showdown. The R8 still sat there, gleaming like a jewel, its sleek curves practically mocking the rest of us mere mortals. By mid-morning, the neighborhood had begun to stir. The mail carrier tiptoed past the driveway like it housed explosives. Delivery drivers peeked nervously over their steering wheels. Even Mrs. Patel from 3 houses down, who typically wielded sugar cookies and judgment with equal force, slowed her walk just to glare at the car. And then came the sound that made my stomach drop. Tires crunching gravel, followed by Karen's voice, pitched perfectly for maximum drama. "Jason, is he parked there again?" I stepped outside, my coffee long forgotten, and saw him. About 30-something, hair gel just enough to imply responsibility, but wearing the exact smug, oblivious expression he'd had as a teen. He rose from the driver's seat, stretched, yawned, and waved lazily like he hadn't just violated every neighborhood rule we had. "Morning," he said. One word, but it felt like a dare. "Beautiful day for a car, huh?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, stunning. Except, maybe a bit close to the hedge." He shrugged, leaning against the car. "Nah, it's fine. Mom said it's fine." That's when the tension snapped. Karen appeared at the top of her steps, arms folded, eyes sharp enough to carve stone. "See, Jason? He knows what he's doing. Nothing to worry about." I wanted to scream. Instead, I muttered something about fire lanes and HOA rules, hoping logic might somehow seep into their fortress of entitlement. But logic dies quickly around Karens and their offspring. I turned toward my house, resigned to a day filled with passive-aggressive looks and whispered complaints. But then a sudden thunk echoed across the driveway. I froze. Looked back. Nothing seemed different. The R8 still looked perfect. But my stomach knew better. Something had shifted. Something inevitable was coming. Then I heard it. A low, dreadful groan, metallic, warped, wrong like a steel scream trying to escape. My heart slammed against my ribs as a terrible realization settled in. This wasn't an ordinary morning. This was the quiet before a storm no one was ready for. The groan came again, louder. My stomach dropped like I'd boarded a roller coaster I never agreed to ride. I sprinted toward the driveway, heart pounding so loud the whole block might have heard it. And then I saw it. The irate Karen's pride. Her son's trophy had been hit. Not by thieves. Not by vandals. But by something I never expected. A delivery truck reversing down our narrow street. Its back bumper scraped along the R8 east side with a sound I'll never forget, a sickening mix of crunching metal and shattered glass. The driver jumped out, eyes wide with horror. Oh my God. I didn't see it. I stood there frozen, caught between disbelief and absolute dread. The car's sleek side was now a warped, twisted sheet of aluminum. The paint was scraped raw, and the mirror hung loose, dangling like a broken tooth. Karenson came sprinting out of the house, phone in hand, hair slightly mussed, panic and disbelief fighting for space on his face. Mom, you've got to see this, he shouted, his voice cracking like he was 13 again. Karen stormed out next, her heels pounding against the driveway like war drums. She stopped a foot from the R8 and gasped, one hand flying to her mouth. Oh no, no. Her son's phone slipped from his trembling fingers. I didn't. You didn't? What? Karen's voice shot upward into a shrill, echoing crescendo. This is a disaster. A catastrophe. I wanted to help, to reassure, to offer something that would ease the shock, but there was nothing to say. Nothing could undo what sat in front of us. The once pristine R8 had become a crumpled reminder of what happens when privilege and arrogance smash headfirst into reality. Neighbors emerged, drawn to the chaos like moths to a flame. Mrs. Patel shook her head. Serves him right for parking like that. Others whispered, some sympathetic, some scandalized. I stood there trapped in the middle of a slow-motion disaster, watching our neighborhood's collective moral compass collide with glass and steel. Karen's hands trembled as she dialed an emergency number, probably lawyers, insurance reps, and maybe even her personal PR person. Her son, usually bulletproof inside his bubble of entitlement, looked small now, young, lost, staring at the mangled car, as it had personally betrayed him. And it struck me this wasn't really about a car. This was about pride, power, and the sudden, humiliating crash of consequences. Then Karen looked at me. Her eyes narrowed. Jason, you saw this, didn't you? A cold weight settled in my chest. That look told me everything. The storm had only begun. The street felt different after the crash, heavier, quieter, as if the whole neighborhood was holding its breath. The R8 sat mangled, its once polished curves now jagged and cruel. Karen hovered beside it, phone to her ear, her voice wobbling between hysteria and full-blown litigation. Her son stood close by, smaller than a child who just watched his favorite toy shatter. I leaned against my porch railing, coffee forgotten, trying to process it all. Neighbors murmured around us, a soft chorus of shock, judgment, and private satisfaction. Some offered condolences, others smirked behind their hands. It felt like a social experiment I never agreed to participate in. Karen's gaze snapped back to me. Jason, you witnessed this, right? Her voice was tight, quivering in that dangerous way that suggested she might either faint or attack. Yeah, I said calmly. I saw the whole thing. Her jaw tightened. And you didn't. She cut herself off, caught between accusing me and realizing no combination of words could rewrite what lay crushed before her. Her son finally spoke, voice cracking. I didn't even touch it. It was the first hint of humility I ever seen from him. He kept staring at the R8, his reflection fractured in the bent metal. For a brief moment, he looked human, vulnerable, shaken, defeated. The insurance adjuster arrived soon after, clipboard ready, radiating a kind of professional calm that only fueled Karen's frenzy. She rattled off accusations and timelines so fast, the poor guy could barely keep up. Her son stood silently beside her, probably counting down the seconds until he could crawl back into his Instagram perfect bubble. I stayed near my porch, just watching. It was surreal seeing someone's meticulously crafted world implode in real time. The lesson was brutes laid bare in twisted metal and trembling hands. Arrogance and entitlement rarely survive their first encounter with real consequences. By the time the tow truck arrived, Karen had shifted from hysteria to strategy. She barked orders, made declarations, and announced to everyone within earshot whose fault this wasn't hers or her son's. The boy lingered a moment longer, staring at the ruined R8 like it was a fallen throne. His face carried grief, shock, and the unmistakable sting of reality. I raised my lukewarm coffee, exhaling a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The street was settling back to its quiet rhythm, though tension still hummed in the air. Lessons had been learned, reputations tested, and for once, the king of the driveway stood humbled. As the tow truck hauled the wreck away, Karen muttered something under her breath, half threat, half heartbreak. And I knew one thing for certain: in this neighborhood, the drama was far from over. It had simply found a new focal point. If this story hit home, tap like, because ordinary people standing up to overreach deserve to be heard. Subscribe to Karen's Hub to see every real-life showdown and protect your own peace of mind. And tell me below, how would you deal with a Karen in your neighborhood?